Hello everyone, welcome to another tutorial of MongoDB Basics series. My name is Jairaj and thanks for joining again. So in previous tutorial we have discussed how to query documents and how to use Mongo Compass for find operations. And also we have seen skip, limit and projection fields. And additionally we have seen how to use Mongo shell find functions. So moving ahead in this discussion, we will discuss how to do update operation and how to update document with various other operations. So let's get started. When we started previous tutorial, I told you that read operations occurs very often than any other CRUD operations, and update also occurs very often, but not as much as read operations. And also, if we think logically, we need to be very careful while updating anything in the database, because if we update something accidentally, then it can cause a disaster. And that is why update operation is very important, and as a developer we need to know all the corner cases of update operations. And normally update operations requires two things. First is the find query and another one is a new data, or we can say the data that we want to edit. So we know that in DB there could be millions of documents. So first we need to identify or filter based on some conditions and get only those documents that we want to update. It could be one document or it could be more than one document. And second thing that we need is the data that we want to update, and updated data. So here I am using my local MongoDB community services, which is already running, and I already started my Mongo shell. And here if I do show DBs, I can see I have this four databases in my Mongo. And now let me use this test database. So for that it is use test, and then if I do show collections, I can see I have these two collections, books and employee, and we're gonna use employee for this. So if I do Control K to clean this Mongo shell, and here if I do something like db.employee.update, and if I hit tab key twice, I can see we have three options here. We have three functions: update, updateMany and updateOne. In addition to this, we have replace one, find one and update, and find one and replace functions. And you can use any of these other update operations based on use case, but internally most of these functions work the same way. If you understand update operation in Mongo, it is very easy to work with all of these functions. So to understand update operation, we can summarize update operations into two types. In Mongo, we can do two types of update operation. First type is the replace entire document, or we can say the replacement approach. And the second one is to use update operators to update specific field, or we can say operators method, operators approach, or targeted approach. So let's discuss the first one. Replacing entire document means first we will retrieve entire document into our code, and then we will edit, and after that we will put that updated document back into the database with our old document ID. One thing to note in update operation is that we can't update a unique ID. In our case it is our object ID. So here object ID is our immutable field, and if we think logically, object ID is the only thing based on which Mongo can differentiate documents. So remember that we can't update the unique ID. In our first approach, we need to retrieve entire document into our code layer, and this code layer could be anything. It could be Java, it could be Python or JavaScript or anything. And in our case, Mongo shell can be considered as a code layer, and we use JavaScript with the Mongo shell. So first step is to retrieve document in code and then edit that document and put that document back into the database with old ID, which makes sure that it will remove old document and will put a new one instead of that. So I am in a Mongo shell, and here first let me use this employee collection, and if I do something like employee.find here, then I can see I have this many documents here. So we have all of these documents in this collection, and now let's say I want to update this first document, which is this Tony Stark, and here let's say I want to add one more field, something called Tony Stark's latest suit, and I want to add marketify as the value. So in that case, let me first create a constant and then store the ID of that Tony Stark into that variable. So for that, let me do user ID equal and copy this object ID and paste it here. And if I hit enter, you can see this user ID, it is printing this object ID. So here user ID is the variable and the value of that variable is the object ID of Tony Stark. So if I want to print that value, I can write that variable, and then if I hit enter, it will print the value of that. So same way, let's retrieve document from database and store it in the variable. And for that, we need to do something like doc equal to db.employee.find1. And inside this find1, I need to pass our queries, and that query will be underscore ID, and the value of this ID will be user ID. And here user ID is also a variable, and we know that value of user ID is the object ID of Tony Stark. So if I hit enter, you can see it is printing the value of document again. So now inside this document variable, we store this entire document. So let me do Ctrl K to clean this, and then if I do doc again, you can see the value of the doc variable. So we have stored this entire document into this doc variable, and this doc variable is on the Mongo shell layer. It is not in the database anymore. So now if I want to edit this, we need to do same way as we do it in our JavaScript. So let me add that new field, something like doc, and then square brackets, and inside this we need to pass the value of field, the name of the field. And let me do latest suit, and the value will be something called mark85. If I hit enter, and now if I print a doc again, you can see this latest suit is mark85. So we can see that field is added here, but this doc variable got updated on code layer, not on the Mongo database. So if we do find function on the database, something like this, you can see the value of that Tony Stark is same as before. It is not updated because the doc variable is on the JavaScript layer. It is not in the database. So we need to put the doc variable back into the database, and for that we need to do our update operations. So to put the document back, we can either use save or update functions, and if you use save, no need to pass any other extra details. We can directly do something like db.employee, and then we can do save, and we can pass that doc variable here, something like this. And if you want to use our update functionality, we have to pass our query object, and which will identify document first, and then it will update. So let me use that update functionality. So here we need to do something like update, and after this we need to pass our old document, which was ID equal to user ID, and then after this we need to pass our document, something like this. And if I hit enter, I can see this, it is saying one value matched and one is modified. So now if I do find here, you can see this Tony Stark is updated with this latest suit equal to mark85 value. So this way of updating is very easy to understand, and it is straightforward 3-step process at the code level. Also, we need to write a code for retrieving the document, we need to write the code for updating the document, and then we need to write a code for putting that document back into the database. But if you think logically, this process is a little bit long. But there are a few problems with this approach, such as it requires round trip. So first we retrieve document and then update and then put it back, right? So now imagine your document size is 200 KB. You need to retrieve entire document even if you just want to update one field. And after update, you need to put it back, which increases the network bandwidth or network load. And another problem with this approach is the simultaneous update. So for example, we have two users, user 1 and user 2, and both are trying to update this Tony Stark simultaneously. And for that, let's say both users retrieve this value as a first name Tony, last name Stark, and latest suit is 85. And then user 1 is still updating, and user 2 update this last name, something like Stark 2, and then he put it back. And then if user 1 updates some value, some other value, and put it back, then this last name will be updated also. That means it can cause unrequired, undesired consequences. So this way, this simultaneous update can cause accidental consequences, and in real world scenarios, this can be very bad situations. So second problem of this simultaneous update can be resolved using some extra logic at REST API side, using e-tags and if match headers. If you want to know more about this e-tags and if match, I have already created another series on REST APIs. You can watch that. I'll put link into the description. Or another approach, we can use some logic at the code side based on some, let's say, timestamp or something, and we can resolve this issue. But if you think these all are the extra effort that developer will need to manage. So we can use our second approach of updating documents to get rid of these problems, which is to use our operators, our update operators, and delegate some work to the Mongo layer. And in this approach, we give details of update operators to Mongo by passing update query using various operators, and Mongo will update the data. As a developer, we don't need to do anything. We just pass all the data to the Mongo layer, and Mongo layer will update on its own. So for example, we have set operators and unset operators. So set operator can be used to set the value of specific field. For previous example where we updated the data of this Tony Stark, same way, let's say we want to update this AKF field as a Iron Man instead of this base superhero. So in that case, we need to use our update functions like in our previous case, and that function looks like this. So first thing is this is our search query, so there is no change in here because we need this search query. But instead of this document that we retrieve and updated, instead of this we need to use our set query. So to write this set query, first thing is we need to write it as a document, and inside the document first value will be $set. So $sign is representing that this is not the regular value, it is the command. So as the value of this, we're gonna need another document, and inside this we need to pass which field we want to update and what is the value that we want to update. So we are updating the AKF field. So first thing is the value of field name, and then we need to pass the value that we want to update. So in a double quotes, we need to write something like Iron Man. So what we did is we wrote our search query, and then we write our set query. So here we didn't retrieve or we didn't do anything. And if I hit enter, you can see here it is saying one value matched. That means this query is matching with one document, and then one document is modified. So now if I do employee.find and if I hit enter, you can see here this AKA value is changed to Iron Man. So this way, in one step, we can achieve this result. So let me do Control K to clean this, and let me again write it as a find so you can see better. You can see here AKA is Iron Man. And in our set query, if let's say we want to update more than one field, then we can specify here something like comma separated value. Let's say I want first name equals something called Morgan. If I hit enter, you can see again number of value modified, and now if I do find, you can see the first name of Tony is changed to Morgan. So let me do Control K and revert back to our Tony. So here instead of Morgan, let me write Tony. So this is back to our regular value, and then AKA is our Iron Man. So here if we compare this with our first approach, we can see significant improvement in performance. We didn't retrieve data into code level, which saves our round trip, which saves our network bandwidth. And another thing is we don't need to worry about our simultaneous update problem, because internally Mongo handles this automatically. So if multiple users are trying to update, it will update like synchronously. It won't affect any other operations. Here we use the set operator to update existing field, but it can also be used for adding new field. So for example, we have new requirement to add a new field franchise with some value in all of these documents. So if we want to add a new field in all of this document, and if we go with the first approach, then we need to go with we need to retrieve all the data into our data layer, then update all the documents one by one, and then put it back into the database. And especially right now we have only few records, but if we think in real world we can have millions of records, and in that case if we do this process that way, then it can take a very long time and it is not an efficient approach. But if we go with our second approach of updating this with operators, it is very easy and we can achieve this very quickly. So let's say we want to edit that field here, then let me do Control K to clean this, and let me write the same thing, but instead of this AK Iron Man, we can write here something called franchise, and value will be Marvel, because all of these superheroes are from Marvel. And Here, if I keep this ID as a user ID, then it will update only the Tony Stark value. But I want to update all the documents, that I need to put empty query, because empty query means all the documents. So if I hit enter, you can see something is not right here, because if you see this nmatch is 1 and modified is 1. Ideally it should update all the documents, but why this is not updating? The reason behind this is this update function is taking other options also. So if I do something like update without any arguments, then I can see the code of this Java, and here you can see this function is taking query, upsert and multi options. So this upsert and multi, by default it is false. We need to enable this. So let me do Control K to clean this, and to enable this we need to pass one more document here in option which can have that value. So if I do multi equal to true, and now if I hit enter, you can see we have 21 documents, and out of 21, 20 is modified, because one was already modified when we did previous operation. So this way we can edit multiple documents together, and in one line of code we can write all of this. So right now we have only 20 documents, but it can write millions of documents also together. So here if I do find now, you can see we have all the documents which is updated as franchise Marvel here like this. So Control K to clean this, and now we have another options which is upsert. And upsert equal to true can be used when we want to add document when no document matches our condition. So this upsert function is very useful when we are not sure about the presence of our specified document. So for example, in our e-commerce applications, new products arrives all the time, and in that case, let's say if some product arrives and we are updating the count of inventory, and if that product doesn't exist, then it will be automatically added. So in that kind of use cases, this upsert functionality is also very useful, and the use of that upsert is similar to this one. Instead of this multi, we can pass upsert, or if we want to use both together, we can pass comma separated value here, something like upsert equal to true, comma multi equal to true. So moving ahead, let's say we don't want this franchise field, we want to remove it from all of them, and we can do unsaid operation for this. So unsaid operation can be used to remove some field from the document. We are not setting the value to null, we are removing the entire field from the document. So for that we need to write the same query, something like this, and I am keeping this multi equal to true because we are editing this everywhere. And as a search query, I am not writing anything because we want to update all, and instead of set we're gonna write unsaid, and we are removing the field name franchise, and the value will be here as a empty value. And if I hit enter, you can see here match value 21, modified 21, because it removed this franchise field from all the documents. So now if I do find function here, you can see none of them have that new field. So this way there are so many update operators are there with Mongo, and so many of them are very useful. So we have a couple of them as such as a current date. So if we want to add a timestamp as a value of the field, then we can use this current date as a something like this. And next we have increment operator to increment the value, and it takes the integer value as argument, and we can increment some specific field by some specific amount. So normally the use case of this kind of operator is in inventory. Let's say we are running some e-commerce application, and we got the order of some item A, and some user is buying of count 2, then we need to reduce that count by 2. So in that case we can write this kind of we can use this kind of operators. After that we have this min and max operator. So if value of the field is lower or higher than some specific value, then it will update the field. So this kind of application can be used in some, let's say some school applications where we are specifying some marks grading or something like that. If marks goes below this or maximum this, then it will update some specific field. So after that we have something called multiplication, and this multiplication is, as name suggests, it multiplies value of field with specified amount. So we can write something like multiply, then price, and then we can specify the amount. So same way this use case is for e-commerce purpose or something like that, where we have discount of something, or we are incrementing the price or incrementing the salary of the employee by some percentage or by some factor. We can use this kind of operator. And next we have this rename field. So sometimes we have requirement to rename the field in the database, and in that case we can use this rename operator. So addition to this, we have few operators to update data inside the array. So sometimes it is possible that in a database we can have data inside array, and if we want to add or remove or some data inside that array, we can use this pop or pull or push, add to set, and position, slice, and sorting, or this kind of operators. So there are many update operators that we can use, and I'll put link into the description so you guys can read about them and read the latest information about them, because we can't cover everything here. But the basic working of all the update operators are same. Once you understand that operation, it is very easy to use. So moving ahead, after this discussion of all the operators and after the discussion of our first approach where we are using replacement, one question comes in mind is that which approach we should use for update operation. Should we go with the replacement approach or should we go with the operators approach? So to answer this, I would say we should understand our requirement before choosing the approach. That means according to our use case, what kind of update operations we need, what is the average size of a document, and how many fields and how many documents at a time we are updating, or is there any threads that we are updating simultaneously. So by considering this all the factors, we can choose this. So for example, updating user data, and in that case we have something called form or something in the UI, and user first go into the edit mode, and when it goes to edit mode we fill that form, right? So when users start editing the data, we need initial round trip to the database to present the current data for that user. And it doesn't matter how many fields the user are trying to update, because in each case we need this round trip, right? So in this case it is better to go with our replacement approach, because efforts for everything is same. But if we are updating few fields each time and there is no complex conditions involved, we can go with the operators approach. So such as an e-commerce application where we are reducing the count of product inventory based on orders, we can directly tell Mongo to reduce count field by order amount with using this increment or something like that operators. So knowing both approaches are good, so we can choose right approach based on our use cases. So that's all for now in this tutorial, and please check description for links to important resources, and in next tutorial we will discuss delete operations. So see you in next one. Till then, like, share, subscribe, and keep learning. Thank you very much.